Alright guys, hope you're well and your New Year's resolution is still on course to last at least 1 week. I know mine's getting there. So we're only a couple of days away from the first state of the game in 2020. It's actually been 4 weeks or a month now since the last one, and I know everyone is eagerly anticipating some news from the developers. I certainly am. Now, I made a video recently stating that The Division 2 is on the precipice. It's either going to flop in year 2 and beyond or succeed, and I've mentioned this because I think the developers really need to respect us as the consumer when they deliver their news to us in State of the Game on Wednesday, and all future news as well. State of the Game can have a bit of a habit of being goofy, going a bit off topic and talking about things that, are completely irrelevant. Like this channel, the majority of the audience of this game are between 25 and 45, so when we see developers on streams not providing the consumer service we've come to expect, we're not easily forgiven. Now, it's been 4 weeks and I think the community has been very patient, so the news on Wednesday has to be plentiful and respectful of us as the community. And this means they need to hit the ground running, highlighting the community concerns and their plans to fix those concerns. I think it would be an absolute failure if they just used what appears to be kind of a division meme at this point, and that's the "we're working on it" phrase. I do not think that would suffice any longer. I think it's fair of us to expect Hamish and whoever he may have with him to finish the pleasantries and then get straight down to brass tacks. 25 minutes of talking about how good everyone's Christmas was or New Year's would. I just think it would be pretty disrespectful to us as an audience, but something I am worried about because topics like this have cropped up before where the developers, they want to talk about stuff but they go completely off topic and go off on a tangent. And the same with when Hamish Bode says, we've ran over time so we need to hurry up. I get that these companies have to stick to a time frame, so how about you talk about all the irrelevant stuff off stream, then come on stream, be respectful, be professional, lay it all out on the table and give the community what they want, which is transparency and good news. And this is what they told us they were going to do in the last state of the game, so this is what I'm expecting following from this state of the game into the future, and that's transparency and just more news. So what sort of things do you guys want the devs to cover on Wednesday? I want you to leave it down in the comments below. Having stalked the developers on Twitter over kind of like the last 4 weeks, I'm pretty sure Frederick Thailander won't be there on Wednesday, so any news about the gear changes, they're going to be unlikely, as I believe this is something he will be discussing instead of other people. What we are likely going to hear most about is episode 3, which is fine, but I think we're all expecting to be disappointed with this episode, just like the first two, because it's not going to do anything to fix the main concerns that we have, and we know this because the developers have told us so. I think the developers need to get the news about episode 3 out of the way first, give us a release date, an infographic on what's going to be included, and then move straight on to the year 2 changes, as these are what people really want to hear about. I think we all expect episode 3 to be exactly what episode 1 and 2 did, which was to, add 2 more missions, other bits of content, and that's about it. The devs already confirmed that all of the RPG changes and everything else coming with that, the overhaul that we're all expecting, that won't be coming until year 2, so that's going to be after March. But I do expect them to talk about some of these changes on Wednesday. Now, what do I want to see? Content. For me, content is the number one problem for the Division 2, and I feel like I'm, battering the same drum here, but it always has been. Since the raid honeymoon was over, content has been the major issue for this game. The raid is quite possibly the only replayable content in the game, and yet it's locked behind having 7 other people to play with. Some of the Division didn't suffer with its incursions. And just as a side note to kind of go off my semi-script for this, I just think that the raid needs to be reduced down to 6 people maximum, but I think it needs to go back down to 4 people. I think having 8 people for a raid at first, it sounded good, but it just locks out so many people. And with the player base diminishing quite drastically over the last 10 months essentially, I just don't think there's enough players to really fill those lobbies any longer. Outside of the raid, we have expeditions, which frankly it's really bad, and that's it. I mean, I don't think anyone believes that expeditions is a good PvE game mode. And since launch in March, no replayable content has been added to the game. Only missions which have given us maybe a couple of hours at best of content every single time a new episode comes out, and that's only a couple of hours if you have the year 1 pass, because then you get the extra stuff. But if you don't have that, then you're basically getting a couple of missions which are no longer than really an hour, and that's about it. And herein lies the biggest problem, because there's absolutely no point in having this in-depth RPG system with endless possibilities if there's no content for you to use that gear. There's no reason to grind. That's what's really wrong. And when you remove the need to grind in a looter shooter, well, that's it. That's a recipe for disaster. Developers have to focus on revealing some replayable content as soon as humanly possible. If the word replayable does not surface on Wednesday, I'm going to already consider it a failure, because this, along with a few other things, is a core component that has been severely lacking. Build classes. Now, I'm not going to lie, I haven't taken builds seriously in The Division 2 nearly as much as I did in The Division. And part of that is due to content, and another part is because I think the game is lacking a sense of build variety when it comes to classes and roles. Now, hear me out. In The Division, you could have tank builds, DPS builds, and then you could have support builds. Essentially, you could have a mixture of each one, which would kind of give you an average of each. But generally, if you wanted to spec into some, you'd go full tank, full DPS, full support. Support builds like Reclaimer-based builds, for example. Now, Title Update 6 was meant to balance the game more, but I think it did quite the opposite. Now it's fairly common to have high armor, high damage, and strong skills in the same build. I mean, at the moment we have the shotgun build meta, which has crazy high armor and 2-shot kill damage in PvP. There are no more roles, and instead it's one build does everything, which is absolutely destroying the PvP balance. Now, PvE, the gear and builds are fine, but even there, I think the game is still missing roles, essentially. It would be great for the developers to discuss the RPG overall in more detail, specifically focusing on how roles are going to play into the game come year 2. It's very much missed, and I think it's a requirement, especially if the next raid requires team synergy that comes from those roles, which is what I'm expecting it to do, because after the first raid, the devs said, we realise this is a bit of a DPS check. That's going to change when it comes to the next raid. Now, if we get the next raid with episode 3, great, but we need to have, if it's going to require you to have team synergy and have roles, well, those changes are not going to come into effect till year 2. So I will be surprised if the raid comes in episode 3. I think it's actually going to come in year 2 of the game once this big overhaul has come into play. Last and probably least for me, and that's PvP. The developers need to address how all the changes coming are going to affect PvP and how they plan to greatly improve that experience, and that's Conflict and Dark Zone. Now, I can't believe I'm putting PvP last. That's what this game has done to me. I used to be an out-and-out PvP player, only ever buying games to play PvP, and that's it. And in many ways, I still am. I bought Modern Warfare, and even though the campaign is meant to be very good, I've not even started yet. I've simply gone straight into multiplayer, and I've played a hell of a lot of that game at the moment. The Division 2 has turned me into a PvE player. The PvP in this game, it has to be one of the worst PvP experiences I've ever played, if I'm being brutally honest, in any game ever. The Division PvP was technically pretty bad, but it was really fun, so I loved playing it. And PvP gave me a reason to grind as well, because I was playing PvE content to get geared towards PvP. Now I'm not playing PvP at all, nor am I playing PvE, because PvP is broken and there's nothing to play in PvE. Now, PvP needs to take some serious focus from the devs, and I'm not too sure that Red Storm is up to the task. I hope I'm proven wrong, but the developers really need to give a summit here. Red Storm need to come out and do something here, whether that be on Wednesday or future State of the Games, whatever it might be. PvP needs to be looked at, because the developers have said before they're not going to remove PvP. So for anyone going down to the comments saying just remove PvP, it's not going to happen. So if you're going to keep it, you need to fix it. And at the moment, I reckon 5% of the game is focused on PvP, and that's fine, but it needs to be good. And at the moment, it's awful. They need to really ramp up how they're going to fix the problem with PvP. Now, these are just, a couple of things among a long line of things the developers need to discuss on Wednesday's State of the Game. Now, appreciate, they're only going to have maybe up to 40 minutes or whatever, so they probably can't discuss everything. Fine. But they need to set the stage for what's to come. I think they did it before where they said each State of the Game is going to focus on a certain thing. But that's fine. They need to do that again. They need to really focus on something for one State of the Game, move on, focus on something move on, focus on something. But I think for this first state of the game, I think they need to kind of give us a bit of everything, give us a taster of everything, so that, you know, we can get our palates wet and we can get excited for what's to come. Of course, they're going to go over, you know, their priority alerts, which will likely include issues with like bullet registration and invisible wall issues that still exist. And this stuff is important, but I think we're all just waiting for the big news. And don't worry, I will have you covered with everything on this channel, so make sure you have notifications turned on. With that said, again, hopefully you guys had a fantastic Christmas, fantastic New Year, and until Wednesday's coverage, epic out.